Thanks all. Yeah, as Mark said, we met about 2.5 years ago, and we started talking about the Dandelion project and what that might try and achieve within our community. And it was interesting, both of us have been looking for somewhere to live in the world where we thought we might bring up our family, and realized actually probably here was a pretty good place to start that. And so we started looking at different subjects like transport, like education, like how do we create the best community on earth. And what we found after a little while of working on this was there's actually subjects that run through all those that appear everywhere. And mental health is one of them, which is why we're doing this event today. Food was another. And the food subject was so big that in trying to run what we were trying to do with that through the Dandelion project, it was too big for that. It needed to stand on its own. So we created Edible Guernsey with a few other people. This is the logo that we developed, which is based around a sweet potato leaf and a bit of a landscape and some of the food colours you'll see. And the remit for Edible Guernsey was to reimagine the food landscape on the island. And that wasn't just the physical food landscape that we have, some of which you can see there, but more, as we do with every subject we face up to in Dandelion Project, trying to put a blank page down and just ask again, what does it look like to create a food system that works for the community? How do we rethink everything? And the reasons why we started to think like that was that my experience of food and the food journey I've been on over the last few years, I started to open my eyes a lot more to what I was eating, what I was putting in my body, how I was exercising. And I found that most of the food habits on Ireland, for most people I was talking to, Western world maybe, were driven by convenience, by price, by packaging, by advertising. And talking to Amy last night, she even suggested just that primal hunger for eating while food's available to you, and in the supermarkets it's available in abundance. So these were some of the drivers that were influencing how people engage with or choose the foods that they eat. And if you follow that model to its conclusion, some of the conversations Mark and I have had about the way technology is going, it will ultimately allow us to create food in a pill form if it wanted to. But for me, this is missing something really dramatic, and I'm really glad I don't have to talk about the science because everyone's done that before, and Amy's just filled in all the gaps on the food side. But for me, this is really missing something. It's missing all of these things for starters when I started thinking about it. Getting your hands in the dirt, spending a bit of time understanding what your food is, has given me a completely different appreciation of how I consume food, what I consume, where I choose to buy it from, the type of food I choose to eat. Keeping my own animals has made me eat a little less meat for starters, but also changed the way I source products I can't create for myself. And these were journeys that I've been understanding have changed our health. So we started through some of the contacts we have with Dandelion Project looking at the Blue Zones projects around the world. I don't know if you know about Blue Zones, but they're essentially little pockets of locations around the world where life expectancy is abnormally high compared to other areas. And we were looking at these because one of the questions we've been asking is how do we make Guernsey the first place on earth where life expectancy is 100? And these Blue Zones areas have something close to this kind of... It turns out they're all hilly, they're all by the sea, there's huge amounts of seafood, the people don't use transport a great deal, they move a lot. There's one in Japan, there's one in Greece, and if you Google this subject, you'll find that there's these pockets around the world. So when we started asking health professionals of a really diverse nature on the island about what's the two simplest things, or what simple things could we do to increase life expectancy on the island, we were coming at it very much from this physical health rather than mental health to start with. The answers we got were almost unanimously, no matter which area of health we were looking at, it was almost unanimously move more and eat better. Before you prescribe any tablets, before you do anything else, these are the two things that kept coming back. And obviously growing some of your own food or getting your hands in the dirt means you're moving more, and typically my experience and the others that we've been working with have shown that that means you start to eat better, you engage with it a little differently. What we found along the way is that those top two in health and nutrition, turns out that there's a load of science coming out that I'm not going to attempt to go near. I've read a lot of the connection between the gut and the brain as well, and your mental health. No surprise, I guess. So this, for me, started to show this project and this subject to be really, really important. How do we address food and how we engage with it in a different manner? And the question we came to was, how do we create high-quality, clean, and locally produced food? And that in itself, I guess, is it's simple if you only ask the question there, if you stop at that point. But if you go on to say for 60,000 people and reduce the cost to zero, it starts to become a little bit more of a complex question. And some of the conversations Mark and I have had about Dandelion projects has been about abundance in the future, the way technology is going to change the way we live. And we see an opportunity for things that cost us money right now coming down to much lower in cost, and people perhaps having more time, the way work balances shift, the way technology takes some of those things away. And asking audacious questions is kind of the way we address this blank page thinking, is that if you ask, how can we reduce the cost of your food by 5%? Well, you can optimize the current system to do that. You can tweak it a little. If you ask, how do you get it to zero and feed everyone on island from the island, suddenly you've got to start rethinking the models we're using, where I finger it in there, statistics coming up. About 90% of the food we eat on island is imported. I think a large percentage of that, 10%, is dairy, which is a protected industry here, as you all know, most of you all know. So this kind of question is, how do we feed the island, 60,000 people, and reducing the cost as we go, ultimately aiming for zero, is what the question we were trying to answer. And at Edible Guernsey, we're doing three things. I'm going to tell you about the three different channels we're working in and some examples of how we're working in them. And then at the end, I'll just ask you a little bit about how perhaps you can get involved. So the first thing we're doing, and forgive me, I only built this presentation yesterday and I'm stumbling my way through it, is I put a few words on there to remind me to better understand who's already working in the island and what they produce. So one of the roles we need to understand, because there's farmers that are working here, there's smallholders, there's growers, there's charity organizations, there's all sorts of people working in food. And it occurred to us that the first thing we need to do is better understand who's already in the island and working in this field. What are they making? Where's the abundance? Where's the shortfalls? How do we bolster what they're already doing? Can we create better routes to market for them? Can we create better education about what they're producing so that we support that business? And ultimately, my experience has been that good quality local food is sometimes more expensive than the cheaper, less nutritious. As Amy suggests, food miles takes away nutrition as well. How, you start to lose these things. How do you change the price point so that we can make the better food, the higher quality food, not only more convenient to access than the cheaper stuff, but make it cheaper than the cheaper stuff, and still give people a chance to make a living? So that's a really important part of this first part, is information. We need to map everything that's already existing on island and better understand it and just get that background work done. So we've already started building a hedge-veg map. For those of you that have come over to Guernsey for this event, we have loads of hedge-veg, little boxes on the hedge where people who grow food put their surplus out and sell it. There's a little honesty box that you put your money in. So we already have hedge-veg on the island, and we've started to map this so we can put it into an app. And ultimately, I want that map to have routing software in, so as on your drive home, you can type in your shopping list, and it'll tell you the shortest route between where you are and where you're going to get these kind of things. So we're taking the old school food system and trying to bring technology to make it more accessible. We're also looking at things like creating hedge-veg supermarkets where we can put a lot of these together so it's more convenient to go to one location and get lots of them. Farmers markets are already in existence. We're looking, as we build more food infrastructure, to set up some farm shops. Jersey does that better than we do at the moment, but to try and get that kind of thing. And make sure that the retailers that are supporting local are empowered to do so more. One of the conversations I had with the co-op was that they have 70 or 80 different farmers turning up on their door, all with different packaging and systems and labeling, and it's quite hard for them to support local growing. So some sort of collaboration there would certainly help bring more product through to the mainstream shops. This idea for me was genius, and it was one of the things that came out of looking at better collaborative methods of getting our food. Those that are already growing generally have a surplus or a glut. When I first started growing some of my own food, I had more beetroot than I knew what to do with, and not my meals were fairly one-sided, and the after results were... I wanted to share that out and not eat as much beetroot. And get some more diversity. But what you find is with communities like on this island, you can actually put out 90% of the beetroot that you grew and get something else back. This is a swap box. It's a hedge veg box that's been, it's innovated, it's grown into something else where you can put the excess that you've grown in the box and take a variety of other things that someone else has grown. There's no money that's changed hands now to do this. So I love this idea as a bit of innovation around the subject. These are my latest set of piglets. This is part of the second part of the project, which is to create dialogue and encourage community initiatives. Once we've figured out what's already here, to try and create this conversation about the importance of food on island, and encourage the community to build projects around this subject. This cheeky little chap always makes me smile. So we started to do a few things with this already. We just held the first annual bean jar competition, which saw close to 1,000 people invade the Fairfield in Cattell and run us out of food within an hour and a half, unprecedented. But we're also doing some community food projects. I've been working in some of the residential homes like the Grand Courtil and going out to Maison Mauritane, where there's 100 people resident and they've got a garden in the middle and they've got time. And so what we're trying to do is say, well, what if we add some herbs and some fruit into that space and you guys can come together as a community, and not only do you get the benefits of people spending time together and young and old coming together and these kind of things, but you also get food out of it, which we can stick on an existing hedge veg model, perhaps try and make the best fruit hedge veg on the island. But this kind of project we're already working on. Education projects we're working on as well. I'm going into education again on Monday at the Grange to create a propaganda garden where the object is not to create food for consumption necessarily, obviously it will get eaten, but it's more about creating conversations around food. So on the Grange, hundreds of us will go past that site twice, 3 times a day, and it's about putting free food that you can just take away. There you go, told you I put this together yesterday. That's the bean jar winners there. Controversially, a pasty very nearly won it. And this is a project in Todmorden. One of the speaker series events we had, Pam Warhurst came over. It was the inspiration of the free food in the community idea. This is outside the police station in the town where they ripped out all the spiky plants and replaced it with vegetables. Nowhere more controversial to do it than right in front of the police station. So this type of project is what we're doing at the education site, where we're putting food in, encouraging people to take it for free, but also to start that conversation. In the train station in Todmorden, it's all full of herbs, and you see people get off the train, take their herbs, take it home, cook their dinner. And this food's free. So going back to the how do we get the cost to zero, there's some ideas with the community initiatives where you can start to take the money out of food already. This was a speaker, Nippon, that we had over on Monday, talking to us about generosity, one of the kindest guys we've met, right up there with John Sweeney. He runs Karma Kitchen events in the US, and we've now got one of these about to start up in Guernsey, so keep an eye on this. It's essentially where a restaurant gives you their kitchens and their dining room for use, and you get volunteers to come into the kitchen and cook, and volunteers to do the waiting, and your bill, when you get the bill at the end of the night, is zero. So they started this with a budget of $750 to pay for the food that night, and your check's zero, but what you're invited to do is pay it forward and pay for the next person who's going to sit down's meal. So you just donate something. And typically they get more money than if they charge for the food, and the restaurant's been rolling and it earned enough money that it's set up other Karma kitchens in other towns. The same process is coming here. I know Genevieve and the new Ziggurat Hotel are keen to host that and start that with us. But it struck me when I looked at the stats here, for almost every hour volunteered, there's a meal served. That's kind of 50,000 of them through this project already served. So that's quite an interesting project that's coming to Ireland. That was more about the second part of the edible remit, which is getting community projects up and running on a small scale We started trying to, the third side of this project, we've been gifted a 5-acre site for 10 years on a peppercorn rent. And what we started creating there was a volunteer group growing food together. And actually, it wasn't quite in line with what our goal for that site was, but the outcomes in community and food have been amazing, and it perhaps fits more into the second part of community growing initiatives. This guy here is a real inspiration to me with this project in a guy called Will Allen, ex-pro basketballer, who's creating a new food infrastructure. It's kind of rethinking. So it's a community farm that has a core of skilled labour with volunteers on the side. He's creating £1 million in weight of food per annum from a 3-acre site. We've got a 5-acre site here in Guernsey for 10 years. So we want to try and replicate, and this guy's already done this 36 times in copy-paste across the US. So what we're going to do is replicate it by bringing him here. This is my slide for a food conference. We've asked Will to come twice to TEDx, and both times he said he'd love to, he really wants to come, but it didn't work with his diary. So we're going to go the other way around. We're phoning Will and saying, when can you come? And when he says a date, we're going to build the conference or event like this around it. So we're going to be bringing all the kind of thoughts around reinventing food on Ireland around Will coming to help us set up this project. You guys can also volunteer your time to help us in any aspect of this project or add value in other ways that we haven't yet thought of. It's not a closed shop project. It's open to innovation and ideas, welcome all the time. We've got to plant these seeds, and we've got to embody the change in the way that we address food. As I say, I'm not going to talk any further about the science of this, because it's been done far better by others. But I just want to leave you with this quote, and thanks for listening.